Welcome back, aviation enthusiasts and history buffs, to Classic Duels, a captivating mini documentary series that takes you deep into the heart of the adrenaline pumping battles that unfolded in the skies during World War II. In this episode, we're in the skies above Europe from 1942 to 45, and we're going to talk about the rather tactical and scientific duels between the Messerschmitt Bf 110 versus the Avro Lancaster. The history of the aerial combat between the Messerschmitt Bf 110 and the Avro Lancaster bomber is a significant chapter in the air warfare of World War II, primarily during the intense night bombing campaigns over Europe, with the first Lancaster being shot down by a Bf 110 occurring in June 1942. The Messerschmitt Bf 110 was originally designed as a heavy fighter, and it had initial success as a long-range escort and ground attack aircraft, but would find its niche when later adapted as a night fighter, and intercepting Allied bombers during nighttime raids. The Bf 110 was typically equipped with forward-firing 20mm cannons and 7.92mm machine guns, along with rear-facing defensive armament. As a night fighter, it also carried radar equipment like the Liechtenstein radar for detecting enemy bombers in the dark. The Lancaster was a heavy bomber that would become the backbone of RAF's Bomber Command, and was capable of carrying large bomb loads over long distances. The Lancaster was central to the strategic bombing campaign against Germany, conducting raids on industrial targets, infrastructure and cities. As well as carrying a bomb load more than the majority of other bombers of the Second World War, it was also equipped with multiple defensive turrets that were armed with 303 British Browning machine guns, and much later they would be upgraded to American 50 caliber machine guns. From 1942 onwards, RAF Bomber Command, under the leadership of Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Harris, intensified its night bombing campaign against Germany. The Lancaster, with its large payload and long range, became the mainstay of these operations, targeting German cities and industrial facilities. In response to the increasing threat, the Luftwaffe developed an extensive night fighter force, with the Bf 110 becoming a primary interceptor. The Bf 110s were fitted with radar to locate bombers in the dark, and operated in coordination with ground-based radar stations and searchlights, a system known as the Kamm-Huber line. The Lancasters flew in large formations called bomber streams to saturate German defences and reduce individual aircraft vulnerability. They relied on electronic countermeasures like chaff or window to confuse German radar, and evasive manoeuvres to avoid night fighters. The Bf 110 night fighters used radar to home in on the bomber streams, guided by ground controllers. Once within visual range, they would close in, typically attacking from below or astern, aiming for the less defended underbelly of the bombers. As the war progressed, Lancaster crews became more adept at evasive tactics, and the RAF introduced more sophisticated jamming and countermeasures. But the Bf 110s continued to evolve, with improvements in radar technology and tactics, maintaining their role as a formidable threat. If a Bf 110 could detect and close with a Lancaster at night, its armament gave it an enormous advantage. The night fighter's firepower was based upon 20mm cannons and 7.92mm machine guns in the nose, and it's said that a Lancaster could be shot down in a 2-second burst. In contrast, the Lancaster's defensive firepower was fatally compromised by the fact that only the rear gunner could really contribute to protect the bomber against dead astern attacks, and the 4.303 machine guns in the rear turrets were no match for the Bf 110's heavy firepower. In typical night engagement ranges of 100 to 300 metres, it was extremely difficult for the Lancaster rear gunners to detect and engage, let alone hit a Bf 110. Most of the .303 bullets that hit an aircraft fuselage at a range of 180 metres would just be deflected. When the Strager music upward firing cannons were added to the German aircraft, the Lancasters being unable to engage targets directly below them proved to be a fatal weakness. Earlier Bf 110 models had a considerable speed advantage over the Lancasters, allowing for rapid approaches and breakaways when needed. However, once the radar and heavier armaments were fitted to the later Bf 110 models, they lost their decisive edge in speed and power to rate ratio over the bigger Lancaster. The standard Lancaster defensive tactic when it detected an approaching Bf 110 was to start a corkscrew manoeuvre that involved a rapid dive, followed by a high-speed climb, then another dive until the night fighter was shaken off its tail. This would cause the novice and less experienced pilots to break off the attack. But the corkscrew tactic didn't work against the more experienced Bf 110 pilots. Overall, the Bf 110 had just enough of a speed advantage to catch a Lancaster. In 1941, the night fighter's ability to detect the bombers and vice versa was roughly equal and depended on available illumination and alert crewmen. Once the Germans developed the Himmelbett system and deployed Liechtenstein radars in the Bf 110 night fighters, the Germans gained the advantage and Lancaster losses increased rapidly. Through the employment of window and sophisticated jamming techniques, Bomber Command was able to erase the German advantage temporarily in mid-1943, and losses decreased. But the Luftwaffe later recovered with improved radars and anti-jamming tactics. So overall, in terms of hide and seek, neither side would enjoy a permanent advantage, only periods of greater or lesser success. In terms of mission endurance, the Lancaster had a clear advantage over the Bf 110, and with its 12-hour mission endurance, it could afford to employ tactics like low flying to avoid the enemy fighters. Even though the Bf 110 was developed as a long-range heavy fighter, they still only had a mission endurance of 3 hours, so given time awaiting instructions, it wasn't uncommon for the Bf 110 crews to run out of fuel before targets entered their sector. So it became important for the Luftwaffe commanders to choose just the right time to scramble their fighters. In terms of external communications, the Lancaster was designed as a self-sufficient fighting unit, although they would be aided by radio navigation devices. The Bf 110, on the other hand, could not function effectively as a night fighter without radio communication with ground controllers. They would maintain contact with its fighter control centre through voice and Morse code. Once the RAF developed aerial jammers, the Bf 110's vulnerable radio communications link badly undermined its ability to even navigate at night, let alone find targets, so the external communications proved to be an Achilles heel for the Bf 110 night fighters. One advantage the German Bf 110 had over the British Lancaster was that it could take more punishment. The Messerschmitt's armoured windscreen could deflect the .303 bullets, and was only really vulnerable if the engines were hit. Compared to an American B-17, the Lancaster couldn't take anywhere near as much punishment. Against the German upward-firing Schrager music cannons, which aimed at the fuel tanks in the wings, the Lancaster proved to be extremely vulnerable, as it was prone to bursting into flames, and due to a narrow escape hatch, the Lancaster also proved to be a death trap for its crews when set on fire, and Halifax and Stirling crews would have a higher survival rate than Lancaster crews. In June 1943, Bomber Command conducted 9 major raids against the Ruhr, culminating in a massive attack against Cologne. The Bf 110s bore the brunt of the battle and inflicted significant losses on bomber formations, including shooting down 89 Lancasters, and this was despite the use of electronic countermeasures and increasing bomber defences. On the night of the 24th and 25th of July 1943, nearly 800 RAF bombers were sent to attack Hamburg. As they approached the target, they dropped bundles of the chaff window strips, which impaired both German radar on the ground and in the air. This hindered the Bf 110 crew's ability to find and attack the bombers, and window caught the Germans totally by surprise, and the bombers were able to strike Hamburg and return with little interference from the Luftwaffe. 3 more raids on Hamburg would occur in July and August, causing the infamous firestorm that killed over 40,000 German civilians. Over time, the German radar operators noted the difference between moving aircraft and clouds of window, and British losses would increase on the last 2 Hamburg raids. The combat between Bf 110 night fighters and Lancaster bombers was a cat-and-mouse game of technology and tactics. The Lancaster's defensive armament and bombing accuracy were countered by the Bf 110's radar and firepower. The intense aerial battles contributed significantly to the overall air war over Europe, with both sides incurring heavy losses. The development of night fighting techniques and electronic warfare during these engagements had a lasting impact on aerial combat doctrines. The struggle between the Messerschmitt Bf 110 and the Avro Lancaster bomber during World War II epitomises the fierce and technologically driven nature of the air war. The evolution of tactics, countermeasures, and aircraft capabilities on both sides reflects the broader strategic imperatives and technological innovations that characterise this period of the conflict. So that's it for this glimpse into epic struggles of the past. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date with more riveting tales of aviation history, etc. Check out the 2 videos at the end, or my CD reviews, or even the playlist I've created. Cheers.